Okay, good evening guys. This week I'm going to be using the screencast for our flipped classroom video, so we'll see how this goes. Okay, this week we will be looking at the reproduction of flowering plants. To describe how a plant reproduces, we will have to look at the parts of a flower. The flower is how angiosperms reproduce. Angiosperm is just a technical term for any plant that has flowers. This is a flower. As you can see, it has a stigma, anther, stylus, and ovary, which contains ovules. The stigma is the part of the flower that receives the pollen. The anther is the part of the flower that produces pollen. The pollen travels down the stigma through the stylus to arrive at the ovule, as you can see here. The pollen enters, the sperm travels down to the ovule where it fertilizes the egg. So, it seems pretty simple. The pollen is here, it needs to go in there. However, this may not be quite as straightforward as it seems. The flower cannot be fertilized by its own pollen. This is where bees and other pollinators come in. Bees and other pollinators, including wasps, hummingbirds, and even bats, are necessary for the reproduction of many plants. Remember, the plant can't move and can't self-fertilize, so it needs an animal to pollinate it. The pollinator needs to fly into the flower, touch the anther where pollen will stick to its body, and then fly off to another flower where it arrives, comes down in here, and when it touches the stigma, the pollen that is stuck to the bee's body will enter the stigma and carry out the process of reproduction. This is how these little tiny dust balls of pollen can be produced and then travel to another flower. So, as you may have also noticed, the flower both produces the pollen and receives the pollen. In a way, a flower is both male and female. It sends pollen to other flowers and it receives pollen from those flowers. So, really, it's carrying out both parts. So, many of the foods that we eat, all fruits and many other grains, rely on this process of pollinators showing up, moving the pollen around, and allowing them to reproduce. If you've ever noticed a mango tree, in maybe January or February when it's flowering, you'll see hundreds of wasps moving from flower to flower to flower. That is this process happening, and that means there will be plenty of mangoes. So, once the ovule has been fertilized, it can develop into a fruit. So, we'll look at the next page and we will see that. This image is describing the process. Once fertilized, each ovule within the flower's ovary contains a fertilized egg. So everything about the flower falls away except for the fertilized egg, which then turns into a fruit, which then has seeds, which can grow into a new flower, which can start the process over again. New flower, fertilized, around. So, it's a simple cycle. But have you ever wondered why plants make fruit, though? This is pretty simple. The flower makes the seed grows into a flower. Simple enough. But then why does the plant make fruit also. This is a tomato. As you can see, little seeds in it have grown from the ovule into the tomato. So why make all this fruit that we want to eat when it really just needs the seed to grow? Well, think back to the fact that plants can't move. So if a tomato plant is just going to make seeds and then drop them on the ground, that means every other tomato plant will try to grow in that same spot. They will all be competing for the same resources, and that won't work. So the plant wants an animal to eat it. If I pick up the tomato seed, carry it away, eat it somewhere else, and drop some seeds on the ground, those seeds will now grow far away from the parent plant. They will not compete for resources, and they will both be more likely to grow. So, that is the reproduction, the sexual reproduction of angiosperms or flowering plants. So, some seeds need to remain dormant. That is because all trees want to sprout at a certain time of year. This could be dependent on the temperature. In the more Arctic or higher latitude climates, when there are cold winters, the seed needs to remain dormant through the winter and only sprout in the spring. The climate here in Nicaragua that has a very hot rainy season and a very hot dry season, the seed needs to sprout at the correct time. If it needs to sprout when there is rain and it sprouts in the dry season, it will probably die unless we water it. But if it falls in the ground in the dry season, it needs to wait for the rainy season. This is where the idea of dormant comes in. This means that a seed can stay in the ground for many, many months without starting to grow. Until conditions are right, then it will stop being dormant, it will wake up and start to grow. So, there are also other methods of reproduction for plants. Flowering plants may also reproduce asexually. This means they do not need pollen from a different plant. They do not need a flower. They simply need to reproduce. Everything about reproducing is built into them. Now there are three kinds. Plantlets means that tiny little plants grow on the leaves of the plant and then fall off onto the ground and grow on their own. Now, as you can imagine, they will all try to grow in the same spot, but it's only a specific kind of plant. Tubers, underground stems, will grow the tube or the root and then grow again next season. This would be your potatoes, onion, garlic, any carrots, the things that grow in the ground. They grow again from the original part of the plant. And runners, above ground stems, which new plants can grow, are called runners. So we'll look at the examples of those three. These are the plantlets. Tiny new little plants grow on the leaves of them. They will fall off, they will land on the ground, and they will start growing. Tubers. Now, this is a potato. If you let it go bad, it will start to grow new potatoes. If you let it sit there long enough, little buds will start growing out of it. Those are new potatoes that will grow again. That's how we grow new ones. And runners, like the strawberry plant, produces runners, or stems that grow horizontally along the ground. So, this little runner right here will actually stick into the ground, grow roots, and start a new plant all on its own. So strawberries, potatoes, and this thing called a kalanchoe plant all reproduce by themselves. No pollination necessary. So, that's the summary. Section summary: after pollination, pollen tube forms from the stigma of an ovule. This tube allows the sperm to fertilize the egg. After fertilization, seeds and fruit form. The seeds are protected by the fruit. A dormant seed can survive drought and freezing temperatures. Some seeds need extreme conditions to break their dormancy. Some plants use plantlets, tubers, or runners to reproduce asexually. Okay, so that's pretty much this section. It's a simple section on reproduction of flowering plants. There will be questions in class tomorrow, so be ready. Thank you.